A Russian Shahid drone has hit the sarcophagus of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, that part that actually blew up and thus has that installation around it to protect the environment from additional radiation. As the Russians are increasing their military capabilities and are increasing the threat to the rest of Europe, as, for instance, the Danish military intelligence assesses. But we'll talk about this as well as about anything else that has happened along the front lines and behind them in this situation report about the war in Ukraine. Surfshark VPN is sponsoring this channel for this month. If you want to bypass geo-blocking or hide your internet activity all with a convenient app, then use Surfshark VPN for just $2.09 a month by using my link. You get 4 months extra as well. Thank you, Surfshark, for sponsoring this channel. Ukraine struck 2 Valdai radar complexes in the Moscow Oblast. According to the Ukrainians, they are being used to fight drones, to identify them when they fly towards Moscow. They also attacked the Novolipetsk metallurgical plant that is responsible for producing 20% of Russia's steel. The SBU is saying the attack, an additional attack happened against the oil pumping station in Tver, and it has stopped operation. The exact damage is unclear, but the biggest event was this here. What we can see here is the sarcophagus, I think at least that's how it's pronounced, of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant that blew up in roughly 40 years ago. As we can see, the outer part is damaged. First it said that it was penetrated completely through and through, and the second part then was stopping it. But as of now, the last things I read were that the outer shell was not completely destroyed in this attack, and there is no rise in radiation. That's at least a good thing. Zelensky talked about it, the Ukrainian president, and he said the drone was flying at 85 meters altitude to avoid being caught by radar. The sarcophagus is 108 meters high, and thus it has hit it. This would indicate that this was not an intentional attack. At least that's what I read out of it. If the Ukrainian president emphasizes the altitude of the drone and the size of the target that was hit, it would explain the strike, and it would not mean an intentional attack by the Russians in this case. The Ukrainians are saying, though, that the area of Chernobyl is often being used for attacks with Shahid drones, probably to prevent shelling, to prevent air defense from engaging, to protect the nuclear power plant, which then again would obviously be a war crime. But in this case, apparently it might not have been an intentional strike on the power plant. We switch to the area of Kursk here, and we have the Russians advancing in Sverdlikovo. This is here on the western side. They've recently entered the town and they are advancing here, and they are slowly pushing further south. So this is a fresher geolocation and it shows them further south in the town. Whether they've fully taken it as of now, I cannot confirm, but it seems that they are clearly advancing inside of it. The Ukrainians, on the other hand, are also attacking. We have fresh geolocations east of Cherkaskaya Konopelka, and those are showing here close to it, and then even further to the east, closer to Ulanok. Whether that attack was fully foiled or not, I cannot confirm, but we see that there still seems to be activity of the Ukrainians east of Cherkaskaya Konopelka, which would indicate that the town is in Ukrainian hands solidly as of now. But that was it from the front line. So likely Russian advances, possible Ukrainian advances, but not much in either way. We switch to the area of Kharkiv, and I do not see any change in territory along the front line here. We go to the eastern front, and here we have the Russians advancing at Yampolivka. This is here. Yampolivka is directly south of Terny, and they have gained additional ground here after the capture of Terny probably 3 weeks ago. This fresh geolocation is roughly here. At this point, So we see that they gained additional ground in the southern direction and are advancing on the eastern bank of the Sherebets, which has some reservoirs here, some which are drained though, as far as I know, because the dam here was blown up. Regardless, we see activity southwards in this direction. But that was it north of the Seversky Donetsk. We go to the area south of it, and here from Bilohorivka, we have indication that Bilohorivka might actually have fallen now, finally. Now, it was reported several times. This is a fresh geolocation, and it shows two Russian soldiers arguing with each other, one of them seemingly wounded, and then a drone drop on them, and it's totally west of town. And while one is lying on the ground, the other one is standing, which would indicate that there cannot be Ukrainian presence really close to them. Otherwise, they wouldn't operate like this. So that, and it's west of town. So probably Bilohorivka has now fallen to the Russians. We see that the pro-Ukrainian deep state map is now setting Bilohorivka more or less completely in the gray zone, in the contested area. To which degree, obviously, I have no way of confirming whether the Russians have gained a foothold inside of the town, whether they have permanent presence in there or not, but there can't be Ukrainian presence anymore close to it. From what we've seen here with the Russians operating here, at least at the time of the recording, Bilohorivka was probably no longer in Ukrainian hands. We go to the area south of it, and there I have no reports, not from Chasiv Yar, not from the other areas in the direction of Siversk. So we go directly to Toretsk, and here we have Ukrainian activity in the middle part of the northern mine here at Toretsk. This is a couple of days old though. So this is from the 12th of February. This is not a confirmation that the Ukrainians are still in the mine today on the 15th of February, but it shows that they have still operated in this a couple of days ago. The Russians, on the other hand, we have further presence here in the west, and there they have this was a drop on Russian positions, confirming solid control over the area here, indicating that the Russians are there now. And finally, we have the Russians back in Chernobyl. We see it here on the eastern side. This is an area which seems to be mostly gray zone, as I've showed you recently, as we had the Ukrainian barbed wire areas here. We had Ukrainians operating in this area down here. We had Russian presence here. A big part of Chernobyl seems to be gray zone, so contested, but we have fresh geolocations of the Russian in the eastern part of the town. That was it from the area roughly of Toretsk. We switch to the Pokrovsk area, and here we have the Russians not just occupying the TO504, but they are also advancing in the east and in the west of their recent advance. This is a fresh geolocation here that we see them west of that crossroads here, where the Russians have reached these positions. This is roughly here at this point. So probably this is more or less contested area as of now, meaning that the Russians are getting on a wider front towards the TO504, which previously connected Pokrovsk with Konstantinivka up here, but now is definitely cut by the Russians, at least in the middle, roughly in the middle. Obviously, there are some side roads that the Ukrainians can use, but the direct line of communication is cut and is confirmed to be cut as of now. The Russians, we have geolocations from Pischane. I told you in the last situation report that we had geolocations of the Ukrainians in this area. While I was not able to confirm whether or not this was liberated by the Ukrainians, in a fresh geolocation, we see the Ukrainians dropping Russian soldiers in this part, so the full liberation of the area can no longer be confirmed, or I was never able to confirm it. Now we have Russian presence again in this area, confirming that Pischane is not solidly in Ukrainian hands. We go further west and then south, because the next reports, the next changes we have are from the Kurakhove, rough Kurakhove area. We have here at Dachne, we see the Russians to the west of it. This should be more or less at this point here. So advances in the south towards the line of communication to the possible last positions of the Ukrainians inside of Dachne. Whether the Ukrainians are still in there, I cannot confirm, but we should expect the occupation of Dachne to be completed fairly soon. West of it, in the area of Rozliv, we have the Russians also advancing. Here we see that along these tree lines, the Russians are at the southeasternmost part. So roughly here, as of now, the Russians are continuing to pressure Rozliv from the south. To the west of it, we have the Russians advancing west of Rostolne and north of Novi Komar. We have a geolocation of this as well. This is at this point here, which should be on the map roughly here. So probably this here might be under Russian influence as of now. As you can see, the pro-Ukrainian deep state map is already adding all of this to a gray zone, which is surely correct according to the geolocations we can see. Other than that, west of Velika Novosilka, here the Russians have advanced further in roughly this area. Parts of it were already occupied by the Russians in the last situation report. Now they've consolidated their control west of Velika Novosilka and have advanced somewhat towards the north. That was it in regards to changes along the front line. We switch to the overall situation, and here we have bad news. The Danish intelligence agency, military intelligence agency, is saying that Russia is 6 months after the war in Ukraine ends, Russia will be capable of attacking and invading a neighboring country. 2 years later, it would be capable of fighting several of them, and including several NATO members, if it chooses so. And 5 years later, it could fight NATO itself if the United States do not come to the aid of the Europeans. This is all in obviously assuming that the European NATO members do not react on the current challenges. And we have to see that disregarding the real threat of military force and the real military threat inside of Europe that was demonstrated in 2014, many European nations have mostly ignored it or have shown to be very reluctant to act on this. And this is now becoming a problem, let's put it this way, as obviously now there's a new administration in the White House that is not unconditionally supporting its European allies as long as they don't pay up, as is being said. This has to be said. Obviously, I will make a video about this shortly, but the European Union as well as the United Kingdom and Norway are roughly have a GDP of over 20 trillion US dollars, smaller than the United States, but not by that far. They have a population of roughly 500 million, and that they are not capable of defending itself against Russia with 140 million and 3 trillion or 2 trillion in GDP speaks for itself. And at least in this regard, criticism towards Europe is more than due and more than justified. And as said, I will make a video about this shortly because it's a topic that I am concerned about for a long time, without connection to the current government. And I will make something about this shortly here on the channel. Russia, on the other hand, Russia is reinforcing its strength right now to be able to face off NATO in the near future. It is getting aid there in financial and material form from North Korea, China, and Iran. So an axis of autocracies is increasingly supporting each other in its confrontation with the Western powers. And the results of that are visible. The IISS has calculated that if we make up for the purchasing power parity, the difference in purchasing power, Russia is actually spending more on its defense than the rest of Europe combined. That's the numbers we have from the IISS. Obviously, the nominal Russian budget for defense is significantly lower, but Russia's costs are significantly lower as well. And if they make up for it, the IISS has calculated that in 2024, Russia spent the equivalent of 462 billion US dollars on its defense, and that is more than the rest of Europe combined. The IISS is also saying that Russia has lost 1,400 MBTs and 3,700 IFVs and APCs in 2024. The Ukrainian General Staff said that more than 3,000 MBTs were lost and more than 9,000 IFV APCs. There we see the discrepancies between Ukraine and other sources. IISS said in the beginning of 2024, Russia will be able to keep up with the losses until 26 or 27. But at that point, they were calculating with 3,000 losses in total, not 5,000. So the duration during which the Russians can keep up the losses has shrunk because of the high losses last year. IISS also said that the Russians are currently capable of readying 1,500 MBTs and 2,800 IFVs and APCs per year. This means that they have actually readied more MBTs than are necessary, but only 3/4 of the IFV APCs, and that's probably one of the reasons why we see so many motorcycles, quads, there's Desert Cross, ATVs, and even recently civilian cars that are stripped to be impromptu troop transport in the past. Zelensky said on the Munich Security Conference that the military intelligence of the Ukrainians are saying 100 to 150,000 Russian soldiers are to be sent to Belarus in the future. I did not see where he said the time frame of it, but he also said that that 15 divisions will be sent to Belarus. It's unclear as of now where they are going to come from, whether this is the long-term vision of the increased size of the Russian army that Shoigu had announced while he was still Minister of Defense, or whether that is going to be some redeployment. But he emphasized that those troops could restart an operation towards Ukraine from Belarus, but they could also attack Poland or the Baltics from Belarus, and the West has to be prepared for that. Troop generation-wise, we have news from Russia. Not only the usual news that they try to coerce people to sign it, but now it's being said that veterans of Muslim faith will get the Hajj paid by the Russian military religious affairs bureau, if I understand it correctly. So basically, if you're a Muslim and you've served in the Russian armed forces in this war, the government will pay so you can do your pilgrimage to Mecca and Medina. Then we have news from troop generation in Ukraine, and there Ukraine is reacting to its demands. Now they offer contracts, military contracts for soldiers 18 to 24 years old. This was said in the past that the Ukrainians should do this, and the Ukrainians were resisting it because this is one of their weakest demographics, and everyone who dies there before he had offspring will obviously weaken follow demographics even more. This will now be a volunteer contract, so they will not be mobilized. It will be a 1-year contract with the option of extension, but the option by the recruit. That's at least my understanding, not by the government. Otherwise, they would be demobilized. So they will only serve 1 year if they sign up, even during the war. They will get the equivalent of $4,700 for signing up. They will get a bonus of $19,120 during the duration of their contract, and they will receive $2,870 in regular wages as a soldiers. If I'm not wrong, the calculation means that they will receive $58,260 for that 1 year of being in the military. During this time, they will have a guaranteed 3 months of training. This is addressing, obviously, the fear by the Ukrainian public that the training for the soldiers is not long enough and that they are being sent to the front lines without being appropriately prepared. 3 months is obviously a much better term than the previous said 6 weeks that are where the initial basic training time after the mobilization restarted and regained speed when the new law was signed in May of last year. They will also get subsidies for mortgages, education, and for health regards, and they will have a time of 12 months after they have ended their contract, during which they cannot be mobilized. So basically they would entice, let's say, a 24-year-old to sign up voluntarily, because that means he will control that. First of all, he'll get a lot of money. Secondly, he will be able to leave the military after 1 year, and then he will have 1 additional year where he can refuse to go back to the armed forces, even during the mobilization. So this seems to me like to be an actually very smart way to find motivated soldiers by the Ukrainians, but obviously at the price of recruiting one of the weakest demographics that they have in terms of age. Then we have something from the political sphere. Medvedev is saying that an exchange of Kursk with occupied areas is nonsense, so he's ruling it out categorically. The Kremlin spokesperson Peskov said this will not even be discussed. Indicating that the Russians are certain they will be able to push the Ukrainians out of Kursk. Putin also had a phone call with the new Syrian ruler al-Shara. We talked about it here in the past, that the Russians show no hesitation trying to improve their relationship with the new government to be able to keep their bases, and that the new Syrian government is not ruling out allowing the Russians to stay in country if obviously the money is good enough for that, and that the West will have to, should better not sleep during these times of negotiations if they want to prevent the Russians from staying inside of Syria. Then we have news from Moldova. Moldova is also closing the offices of the Commonwealth of Nations, of Independent Nations, the compatriots living abroad, and the Rozsotrudnictwo, which is a diplomatic mission to spread Russian culture, values, etc. This is basically the same as Azerbaijan did, which I talked about in the last situation report. The Moldovans, from what I understand, are saying not like Azerbaijan as foreign influence, but they are saying this is because the Russians continue to use Moldovan airspace for their drone attacks. And recently they summoned the ambassador and presented him on the table with parts of drones to make their point. Then we have news from the new American government. According to this Financial Times report, the United States were giving a contract to the Ukrainians to have them sign over 50% of their resource rights without the promise of future aid. That at least was being said. This was to pay for past aid that the Ukrainians already received. And when it was about security guarantees, the article says that the Ukrainians were told the resource rights will guarantee American presence. With this might be true, but on the other hand, you could cynically say, well, if the Russians say, we'll honor those contracts, you will be able to continue exploiting the resources, and will, once we taken it over, then it would not be a promise that helps the Ukrainian anyways at all. But while this sounds horrifying, at the same time, the news are mixed. As you can see here, Vance wields threat of sanctions military action to push Putin into Ukraine deal. So while we still have mixed news from the US administration, what kind of peace they aim for and how they're going to try to achieve it. It's clear as of now, though, if Trump really wants to achieve peace, he will be forced to use massive pressure on both sides, because the negotiation positions of Ukraine and Russia are far too far away from each other that they could meet in the middle, as someone might suggest. Neither Ukraine nor Russia are broken at this point and are thus looking for a peace at all price to end the war as fast as possible. Both have been hit hard, both have suffered hard, and obviously Ukraine has lost roughly 20% of its territory in the war since 2014, but Ukraine is not broken yet. Ukraine can continue to fight, and they can continue to fight quite some more time if they get enough help, obviously, because they will not be able to equip and fund their military fully by themselves. Then that means that the US administration's expectation to make peace fast might lead to a sobering experience really fast. We have some news about international aid as well. The United Kingdom is promising £150 million extra, including drones, dozens of MBTs and armored fighting vehicles. And that was obviously interesting. Oh, are they going to send additional Challenger 2? But we see here more than 50 armored and protective vehicles, including modernized T-72. So they bought somewhere T-72s and financed the modernization to hand it to Ukraine, which means the Ukraine will get additional T-72s, not Challenger 2s. They will also hand over additional air defense, and they plan to give another 4.5 billion pounds in aid this year in 2025. Germany is sending 6,000 AI drones from the company Helsing. Norway wants to train a Nordic brigade with other Nordic countries, and they want to not just train them but also equip them. In this case, Norway announced they are going to train and equip 1 battalion, as will the other Nordic nations. I have not seen which ones, but I would guess Sweden and Finland will be the other two that will train this brigade. And the Dutch are sending 25 YPRs. This is basically an M113 equivalent that is going to be sent to Ukraine. That was it for now. But before I finish, I want to thank Sam Garcia again for his incredible generosity. He sent me the Windfall battleships Agincourt, Canada, Erin, and Eagle, and the Balkan and Latin American arms races. He sent me Desert Armor tank warfare in North Africa, beta form to Operation Crusader. He sent me British coastal, I think it's all from him, yeah, British coastal weapons versus German coastal weapons. This book was also from him, and he sent me US Navy armored cruisers 1890 to 1933. Thank you for your generosity once again, Sam Garcia. If you want to support the channel, you can do so by the means in the description. I also have my wish list for books there that Sam Garcia used this time. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. It helps with the algorithm. You know the drill. Comment if you have something to add. And if you're new here, I would like to invite you to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon. This channel is only possible because of the support of viewers like you. If you like to support the channel, you can do so by the means in the description. But that's it from me for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll be back.